you trying to steal my spot?
All right, so before we get started here, I've had a couple questions.
Oh, someone here all the time.
What's going on?
One chair can be.
Okay. There's a chair here, there's a chair here,
Yeah.
a couple of chairs back here.
No one wants this chair.
Sorry, Dad.
So before we get started, I've had a couple questions from a few of you that have talked about when you get into your ceiling plans, you don't see anything except for maybe column grids. You don't see your ceilings, you don't see your walls, you don't see any of your doors and other components. And a lot of you said you've tried your visibility graphics and everything's turned on. But one thing you'll have to start doing in most of your views is that the AutoCAD site plan or the site file that we have imported into our Revit projects, in certain views, when you cut a section or if you cut a ceiling plan, that AutoCAD drawing is probably getting in the way of allowing you to be able to see through and to look at your different content. The reason for that is whenever you bring in a SketchUp file or an AutoCAD file, basically Revit doesn't recognize it as a solid geometry, and it doesn't understand that if you're trying to cut a section through that model, it basically doesn't understand that you're actually able to cut through and see kind of hollow information. And so it's always showing you kind of an elevation view or a plan view of that model. You can see here I'm in my hotel project and I'm in the ceiling plan and I'm on level 4 and I can't see anything except for these grids. If you encounter that problem, go into your visibility graphics, your VG, and under imported categories, remember that's where your AutoCAD file ends up. If you turn off the DWG file called Lower Manhattan and just uncheck that and hit OK, you'll see that all your content is visible again. So if you're not seeing some kind of geometry, that's probably why in most of your views. And that's going to happen whenever you cut a section and whenever you probably create a new ceiling plan or you flip into a ceiling plan for the first time.
So you have to do it on each level?
Yeah, and VG is visibility graphics only for that view. And so you'll have to, there's no kind of global turn off that element in every single view. So it's going to be kind of view dependent as you proceed. So I think that was like pretty much the top question that came through while everyone was working on their lighting plans.
Apparently my computer can get a license
For Revit?
I had that happen before too, and Ryan got on and it worked for him.
Okay, so maybe try
Try a different computer for now. Are you plugged in?
No,
Having no problem.
Yeah, you might not have you might not have a connection to the server. Okay.
It's broken.
Well, we might want to write that on the board. What number is that? 14. There's a computer here that we can get logged on for that. All right. So today I want to go over basically working with walls in a little more detail. Last time we looked at ceilings, and we don't really need a particular file. You can actually work on your, just like a new project. I'm going to open up the file where we left off last time, just so there's some, content to look at on the screen. But you can just start a new project if you'd like. Today we're going to go over stacked walls, dealing with reveals and sweeps, and then variable layers, and if we have time, maybe we'll get into a window family. So, by the way, those of you that are in my computational practice class, there's a few of you. I was just going to let you know that today's assignment was to go back and review our BIM methods classes 7 through 10, or 7, 8, 9, and 10. And only you guys will know this, but you might pass this on, that this is Google Analytics of my class website. I can see who visits certain pages, not who specifically, but I can tell that particular content, if I scroll down and look at the pages here. Right now, pages for, let's see, class number 7, it's kind of down here somewhere, I'll have to look. I looked at it earlier, it had like something like 60 views, yeah, here we go. 70 views, so I'd expect that this number goes up quite a bit between now and Tuesday. And then same thing with class 8, 9, and 10. So I'll be looking at that. Anyway, all right, back to BIM methods. One of the things we've really just kind of dealt with as far as walls are concerned is making the different layers. You can actually click on the wall, click on edit type, and we talked about editing the structure and adding in different materials such as additional layers of gypboard and that kind of thing. One other component to working in this wall dialog box, so if you just open up a new project file, you might want to just draw a let's say a generic 8-inch wall for the moment. And I'm going to actually duplicate this and call this generic 8-inch with reveals. And one part of this dialog box that we haven't gotten into is, so far we've gotten into looking at the structure, but if you click on the edit structure and then preview, you'll see this kind of preview that you can look at in floor plan view, and then there's a little down arrow that allows you to also select a section view of looking at this wall. When you go into the section view, notice down at the bottom here, all of these additional buttons become activated. We've got our modify, merge regions, split, assign layers, and sweeps and reveals. And I want to go over some of these components here because it gives you some additional ability to model a little more detail into your wall so that you're not always looking at a flat plane all the time or always relying on material maps in order to make your your walls actually read, especially when you render. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple different layers here. I just want to add some gypboard to the wall, so we should remember this from another couple classes. I'm putting gypboard on either side. Maybe I need to magnify this real quick. So I've got my structure here. I've added my layers. I'm going to add a finished layer on each side and then make these gypboard. So select my materials. Let's see, gypsum wallboard. There you are. And give it a thickness of, we'll do 5/8. And I'll make this structure inside, we'll just do that as, just do a 6-inch stud there. I'll find metal stud layer. Okay. So back to that wall. I'm in a preview mode where I can see the section, and then when I click on edit structure, I have these additional keys that I can actually pick on that have to do with assigning layers and merging and all that kind of stuff. Now, reveals and sweeps are basically 2D section profiles, just like a rail. Remember when we did rails, we did basically a 2D shape that eventually gets extruded along a path. Reveals and sweeps are similar profiles, but they're modeled in a particular family environment. A reveal is something that cuts away from the wall, so it creates some sort of void or cut. and a sweep is an additive component that basically adds a solid piece of structure that can be applied to the wall. Now, if we click on reveals, we get into this dialog box that allows us to pick a profile. We can add a reveal, so you can click on add. And then in the down arrow, you'll see that, you know, again, Revit comes with its own default of looking at, right now it just has brick courses. But I'm going to pick a reveal brick course number, 1 brick. This isn't necessarily saying that this is going to be brick that we're applying because we're making this a reveal. It's just saying that this dimension of this particular profile, whatever it was called 1 brick, that's going to be the size of the reveal. We've got distance of where this reveal is going to show up from the base, whether it's going to be on the exterior side or the interior side, what the offset of this reveal will be, how deep is it going to penetrate into the wall, and we may have to flip it or do a setback. Right now I'm going to type in 3 feet for the distance from the base, and I'll keep it on the exterior for a minute just so I can see what happens. Now if you look at your little preview window off to the left, again, in this preview window you can pan around. So I'm panning around just like you would pan around your drawing file. And I can also zoom in. So you can see I got this brick, it looks like a brick section cut, penetrating into this particular wall. I can click on reveal, I could change the offset. Maybe I'll make this 1 inch and hit apply and see what happens. And you see how when I do the offset, it cuts that brick further into the wall at that level or at that part. Click OK. I'm going to zoom back out. And then if I hit OK again and OK, and look at my wall, I now have a cut that goes all the way through this wall, which is something that will show up in elevation views. It's going to show up when you cut a section. And you notice that you don't see the brick. The brick obviously, even though in that preview it showed up in the section cut, it's essentially a void component when it's a reveal, and so it isn't going to show up in the actual model. Now, reveals and sweeps, they only work on walls that are vertical. So if you're trying to apply reveals and sweeps to something that happens to be on the exterior of your hotel and you've got a curvy, slopey wall, it's not going to accept the reveal or the sweep. So again, this is something for walls that are straight up and down. Revit doesn't have the capability to work with more complex walls with this type of component at the moment. Another method for applying reveals and also sweeps, this particular method would make it where, no matter where you put this wall, so if I actually change all of my walls to be this 8-inch with reveals wall, you'll see that reveal is always going to be 3 foot from the base. Now, both of my walls are different heights, so it doesn't matter. Because I set that reveal to be 3 foot from the base, it's always going to be 3 foot from the base. If I were to change this wall type and click on edit type, structure, look at my reveals and change my distance from the top, didn't like my reveal because I put it 3 foot up from the top. I need to do a negative. So since I'm doing from the top, I'll do a negative 3 foot, hit OK. I like that a little bit better. But now you can see how that reveal doesn't line up, as it goes around the wall, because my constraint was from the top of the wall. So if you have different height walls, that reveal is always going to be from that one particular dimension, negative 3 foot from the top. And go back and change that back to the base. And I'll have to take off this negative, do from the base, okay. So you can add as many reveals as you want. You could keep adding more and change, just like the spreadsheet when you build a railing system. we kept inserting more rails and then applying that particular profile shape is going to be 3 foot from the base, or then 6 inches from the base, and we gave it all these different heights. You can do the same thing with the actual reveals. Now, if I were to make this brick component into a sweep, so if I go back into this dialog box and create a sweep, again, my reveal is not there because that was in the other dialog box. I'm now in the sweep dialog box. I can add a profile. You can see there's a bunch of other different components, but I could also choose that one brick again. This time I might make this 6 foot from the base. Hit OK. You can see this is a different size component, but I've got this piece here that I can maybe move into the wall a little bit. Maybe I'll offset it 1 inch. Maybe offset it -1 inch. So you can see how you can move that in and out, or I could, maybe that should be -2. And so now the sweep added a solid component, to your wall. So I've got the reveal that's cutting, and I've got the sweep that's adding. You can add reveals and sweeps in another method. The other method would be, so the method that I just did there, we can only make kind of these horizontal lines through the wall. That, it's going to be something that gets built up from the ground up. But if you wanted to do vertical sweeps or reveals every now and then, you don't have that ability to do it in that particular dialog box. The other way to add these components is to look at the wall in elevation. So if I look at this back wall in elevation, I'll put a little, turn it on shaded view here. If I click on the down arrow under walls, you'll see down at the bottom, now that we're in elevation, and you can also do this in 3D, I believe, in a 3D default view. But because I'm in elevation, wall sweep and reveal are highlighted. Notice if I go into a floor plan and click on the down arrow and walls, wall sweep and reveal are not highlighted. They'll only be highlighted in an elevation view. And when I pick one of these, so I'm going to pick a reveal, we have to kind of edit this particular reveal that's in this properties dialog box. If we click on edit type, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm just going to call it reveal 2 for now. But you can see all it's doing is referencing a particular profile shape again. So we can find our one brick, click OK. And then when I hover over the wall, I can place this reveal anywhere on the wall in the horizontal manner, or I can click on the top and change it to vertical and then hover over and cut my reveal into the wall that way. So in large walls, if you've got a wall that's spanning, I'm not sure what the length of this one is, 82 feet 6 inches, most likely you're not going to have a wall that's just completely blank. If you ever look at even stucco, you have to have reveals every 10 feet or 20 feet or 30 feet or something like that. You have to have construction joints. But also if you're doing like a metal panel building, metal panels only come so high. You might have a horizontal reveal every 3 feet to get your particular metal panels. They might only go like 30 feet long, have a vertical reveal, and then you'll have horizontal reveals every 3 feet on center. So, when you actually apply the material to your wall, that's called metal panel, it's only gonna make a general metal, aluminum look to it, but it's not gonna have all the detail that has to do with how often you have a reveal or a, protruded object here, like your sweep. So to add more realism into your buildings, and also so that when you look at it in elevation, you don't have to draw all those lines on there, you don't have to draft those lines on later. You actually get your articulation of that particular wall type, showing up in all your different views, whether it's in 3D or in elevation, or even when you cut a section. So if I were to look at one of my section cuts, you can see I've got also the reveal and the sweep that's protruding out as well. Plus, when you hit the render button, you're going to get that level of detail in there as well, kind of looking at that particular material. So it's a good way to give instant scale, again, to your buildings. Buildings look very amateur-like when they don't have any kind of articulation set to the model. And if you've got, walls that are 80 feet long or so on, if you don't have any kind of articulation to it, it kind of looks like you haven't been really thinking about what type of material that wall is going to be and what type of a, how large of a panel you can actually get from time to time. Same thing with glass, you wouldn't have an 80-foot long piece of glass, and that's why we went over adding in mullions and all that type of stuff, because you're only going to have glass that can come so large. The next part I want to talk about is, and so again, we can only do that in straight up and down walls. So that might be something good for the interior of your hotels, since we've got more complicated structures that have to do with the facade. Your facade systems are going to be articulated with the tools that you already know about, which are your curtain panels and your adaptive components and those type of divisions that you can do to the mass element. The other wall type I want to go over is stacked walls. We've gone over, so basically I've made a wall type here that has a reveal and a sweep. And let's say I actually wanted to have a different wall type stacked on top of the other. Revit has a particular wall type. If we look at I'm just going to go into a floor plan. And if we click on wall to draw one and click on the down arrow for our properties, remember we've looked at our basic walls, and then down at the very bottom we also have curtain walls that we've dealt with. But down at the very bottom we have a stacked wall application. And there's only one, so we can click on that one. And stacked wall, if you click on edit type, you'll see that the dialog box, there's nothing really to it. It's just a structure and it has edit. We click on edit. We click on edit, you'll see that I can turn on a preview of this wall. And all it's really doing is referencing two different wall types. So I've got, in this particular wall that's already here, we've got exterior brick on metal stud and an exterior CMU. And then it says basically one is going to be a variable height and the other one is going to be fixed. I could type in 6 feet and say that this bottom wall will always have this particular wall type 6 feet up from the base. And the rest of it's going to be variable, and it's going to depend on the additional properties that you add into that wall type. I'm going to hit OK, but I'm exiting out of this. I'm going to duplicate this wall, and let's just call this stacked wall for now, something generic. But if I want to change what type of walls are now part of this stacked wall system, I can just come in here and I can add in, and you can see that if you already have a wall that's been created, you can click on your down arrow and then choose additional wall types. So I might come back down here and choose my generic 8-inch with reveals, and maybe on top, actually maybe that one should have been on top. Let me put that one on top. And you can stack the same wall on top of it, each other if you needed to. Maybe I'll do, yeah, there we go, something crazy, abnormal, but just to make a point here. You can add more wall types, so I could also insert another wall, and maybe this other one, didn't like that one. So each one of these are going to always have a particular dimension that you can add in. So I can add in, I'll make this one 8 foot. I've got the bottom one is at 6 foot. And then there's always going to be one wall part that is always going to be variable. And the reason for that is whenever you draw your wall, you can always vary the height of your wall by the top constraint. And so you always need some component that's going to stretch up and down. So if you decide that you always want this top piece, the one that's a generic 8-inch, yeah, zoom this out. If I always want this piece to be, you know, let's say 8 foot, then I can type in 8 foot, and it didn't like that one. I need to, oh, here you go. If you click on the number here, and then click on this button that says variable, that switches it and makes it variable. Just that stuff. So now what I've got here is I've got a base that's always going to be 6 foot. I've got a top that's always going to be 8 foot with this particular wall section. And then the one that's in between is the one that's always going to stretch depending on the top of or how high the wall ends up being. But you can also see that I don't really have my walls aligned very nicely. Walls are aligned by the offset up here at the top, so I can change my wall center line, finished face exterior, finished face interior, core face exterior, and core face interior. That's where it becomes important that when you set up your different wall types and you add in all those structural layers that we talked about, and you're trying to figure out what needs to be in the core layer and what needs to be outside of the core layer. That also is an important decision, is if you're eventually going to be stacking walls or something like that, you might want something that you can align eventually. So let's say you're going to be dealing with metal stud walls that you might stack on top of each other, and maybe one of them has brick on it, the other one has EIFS, and the other one has stucco or metal panel or even gypboard. If you made your metal stud layer always the core and everything else outside of the core, you could easily align all your metal studs together by just, you know, choosing core face exterior or core face interior or even core center line. But if you need to make some adjustments, you can see no matter what choice I made here, this wall type on the bottom, I'm not sure how it was originally set up, just isn't cooperating the way I want it to. So if you need to make any adjustments, that's where this offset comes in, and then you can add in additional dimensions here and kind of move your section back and forth left and right by just using the offset. You can type in a negative. So I've got this crazy wall going on here, and I can exit out, hit OK, and OK. And if I look at I drew. I guess I didn't draw that wall. So I can change this wall to, I'll make it like 40 feet. And then you can see that, you know, I've got like a CMU down below, and I've got all this other information up there, and then I've got my reveals and my sweeps up above. Now, if you want to make different types of shapes or reveals or sweeps that go into your wall type, these are created in the profile families. So under families and profiles, we've been in this area before in the project browser when we dealt with the railings. your profiles and your reveals and sweeps are part of this family type. But if you want to make your own shape, so let's go into the user interface, recent files, and I'm going to click on new. You would scroll down to profile, and down here where it says profile, closing that. You'll see you have profile, profile hosted, profile mullion, profile rail, profile reveal, and then profile stair nosing. So if you wanted to make a reveal, you would work in the profile reveal section. If you just wanted to make a sweep reveal or a sweep profile, we would just make it in the profile section. So if I want to make I'm going to make a new sweep. So I'm going to click on profile and open. And all this is again a 2D element with an insertion point here at the center. I can draw lines. I can't draw any kind of 3D components, but I can draw a line. And maybe I'm going to make it like a little football shape. So I've got this little fin that I've made, and I might want to make it parametric so I can select a couple different shapes. So I'm going to create a reference plane off to the right here. And I should be able to change the dimension of this reference plane and, nope. Let's draw my football again. Draw a line. I'm using a start-end radius arc. I'm going to make sure to snap to these reference planes. Will this change? No. It's not liking that. I'm going to draw a couple lines that are locked to these reference planes. Give it a little bit of a thickness, so I'll do like this. I'm not going to worry about this shape too much. A little tricky with the curves. So let me go with the generic or just a generic football shape. Go back to making this. As long as you make it a closed shape and load it into the project, we can then click on our wall and edit. And I should be able to go into my edit structure, click on sweeps, and add a profile. And when I do that, I should be able to select my family component. I just called it family 1, I didn't save it, so. And maybe I'll put this 8 foot up. So you can see I've got my little football sitting up here. And maybe I can make it engage the wall a little bit more. Do something like -2 inches. Look at this. I've got a little more intricate detail to my wall profile. So you can see it's pretty easy to come up with things that you can add to your wall, and you could add these profiles, whatever different shapes that you want to have them occur. A lot of times I'll use the profiles, like the sweeps, to create parapet caps, whether it's stone or aluminum parapets on top. You know, we don't have those type of conditions with our hotel, but that would be another use for that particular tool. Self-explanatory, kind of. Seems pretty straightforward. Again, it only works on straight up and down walls, so you have to use your discretion of where you can use those. Next thing I want to do is get into making windows. So far we've made curtain walls that have glass and mullions, but if you actually want a window that you can cut into the wall, normally you would not make those out of curtain wall components. You would make something that could be hosted, just like a door. When you place a door into a wall, and then that door gets cut out, and then you're able to kind of work with the wall, and it interacts with the hosted element. With a window, it's basically an element that's going to have the ability to cut an opening, and then we can add solid geometry to it to have a solid mullion, and then also glass that goes around it. You can add your own windows. So if I click on window, you can see these comes with a basic fixed, or I could look at the loaded families that come with Revit, and you get these very intricate, nice, crazy residential window types, that you probably would not use in a commercial setting. And so there's also louvers in there, but one thing is we want to be able to make our own designs and not rely on somebody else's model in order to place windows into a particular wall. Now, if you were actually making a residential house, I have said in the past that you would go to that manufacturer's website if you're actually putting in a particular manufacturer's window type, and you'd be downloading their Revit components and using them. You do that a lot with residential, but again with commercial, you're basically going to be making your own storefront systems, even though they're called windows here. In real construction, they would be storefront systems that would be going into the wall opening. So this kind of introduces the next stage of our Revit understanding, which is modeling solid geometry within the family environment. We've done some solid modeling with the conceptual mass environment, but not a whole lot with the actual either generic modeling or some of the extrusions and things like that we can do. You have if you've been in the computational practice class, but I want to introduce it here as well. So, view, we're going to go into user interface, recent files, and I'm going to click on families and new, and we want to use the window template down here at the bottom. Now the window template basically comes looking like this. It has a wall. This should be kind of similar to the door exercise that we did. I think we just kind of looked at a door. We didn't go into a whole lot of detail. But the wall that is in this particular model is just a default wall. It's just a template that is showing how this window is going to interact with the wall. And then once we bring this into our Revit environment, this wall disappears and only the window remains. So this wall that you see when you look at a 3D view, it's just part of this particular family and won't actually show up when you create or bring in your window into the project environment. You can change this wall. You can click on edit type and edit the structure and do all that kind of stuff that you would normally do, but there's really no reason to, because again it's just a template. The only reason you would change this wall around is going to be to test your parameters out and make sure that your window works the way that you want it to. If I look at it in elevation, so under elevations and exterior, you can see that Revit comes with already a set of default parameters. So if I click on the family types, this window already has a height and a width and a default sill height. Already has some parameters that are set up, and I can come in here and change. I could make this 4-foot width, hit apply, and you can see how that square in the middle changes dimensions. That square in the middle, if you hover over it and tab, you'll see a little tooltip that comes up that calls us an opening cut. That opening cut is a sketch that is defined by and is locked to all of these reference planes. You can see how there's these additional reference planes to the left, to the right, to the top and the bottom that basically control the opening or control this sketch. All that is a void opening that is part of this window family type. So let's make a window real quick. If you click under Home, you have these other, and again I'm in the elevation and exterior view. If I click under Home, you'll see that we have kind of more familiar modeling tools that you're probably a little bit more familiar with if you're using SketchUp and Rhino and other 3D programs. All the rest of the families, so anything that's not a curtain panel based family, anything that's not a generic adaptive component, anything that's not a conceptual mass, contains these modeling elements: extrusions, blends, revolve sweeps, and sweep blends. This is so you can make any kind of 3D geometry using conventional modeling methods. I'm going to make an extrusion. I go into a sketch view and I click on extrusion. And I'm going to lock using pick lines, and I'm going to lock to all of these reference planes. I forgot to lock. All these reference planes around the window opening, and then I need to trim and extend or trim the corner to make sure I'm closing up this shape. Next thing I'm going to do is click on offset, and I'm going to offset 2 inches with the copy command on and offset towards the interior. And do my trim and extends. And so I'm basically making a sketch of the window frame that's going to be a solid component. Now before we move on, this particular window frame, I want this to always be 2 inches wide. So if I want this to always be 2 inches wide, I've already offset it 2 inches. I want to make sure that I strike a dimension from the reference plane to that interior dimension or that interior line. And I want to do this on all around the window. And then when I click on the dimension, you want to lock that dimension so that we're constraining 2 inches and locking that dimension so that no matter what size this window ends up, that interior line will actually move and be 2 inches away. Dimensions are under annotate and aligned, or if you're in the modify under measure, align dimensions, it's the same tool. So now when I exit out of this and look at it in 3D, you can see I have this window frame, and by default it's always going to extrude from a starting point at 0 and extruding out at 1 foot. If you look at the properties once you select the frame. That's okay for now. What's your error message, David?
Just finding my first time.
All right.
That was trying to go backwards.
Okay. So basically now what I want to do is set a couple other constraints to this extrusion so that when I look at this in plan, so if I look at it in plan, this extrusion should always be flush with my wall. In order to get that to happen, if I select that extrusion and move these handlebars up until it snaps to the wall, I can lock it. to the face of that wall. This is where the changing of the wall type is going to come in handy. I want to test and click on the wall and then click on edit type and change the width of my wall, or the depth of my wall, to something else, and make sure that when I do that, my frame also adjusts with it. And because I made those adjustments, it works. So our test is okay and we can move on. The other part I want to do is give this a material. If I click on the frame, over here to the left in your properties, you have material. We can click on by categories. And I don't really see anything except for glass and maybe a default wall. So I'm actually going to duplicate the default, and I'm going to call this frame. And then under appearance, maybe I should make this metal, and what would be a good one here? Maybe aluminum cast. No, anodized. If I do like an anodized light gray. Aluminum cast looks better. Or I'll just keep it default and make it generic and give it a white color. That would be easier. And so under graphics, I'm also going to change this shading to be white. And the reason I used the default was so that I didn't have all that additional junk on there, because when you render it, you're probably not going to see all that detail of the stipple pattern and all that stuff that the anodized aluminum material was showing. I just want it to show up white. And so I've got all that set. I can click OK. And now I've got my white frame, and I can see it in the gray wall there. I'm going to do a save as here real quick. Do save as family, and I'll call this window. You might give it eventually some other elaborate name like window with 2 panes or window with 3 panes, stuff like that. Now the next part is we need to add in our glass, so that also when we look at it, we've got a solid geometry, and then also when we render, we've got glass. So I'm going to go into the floor plan view, and you'll notice that there's a reference plane in the middle. If I click on it, that's called center front back. If I click on the exterior, I want to model glass inside that's going to be locked to this frame and is going to move and adjust with it as we change our window dimensions. One thing we need to do before we move on is test that when I change my height, my frame moves with it. If I change my width, my frame also moves with it. Again, we always test our geometry before we go too much further. So next part, I'm going to go to home and an extrusion. And this time I'm going to use pick lines, and I'm going to pick the interior side of the frame, and all I'm going to do is lock these lines to that frame. I don't have to do any more parameters or any other adjustments, because we've already set parameters, or the window template already came with a width and a height set, and we've already set a constraint for the frame to always be 2 inches away from top, bottom, and sides. Now all I have to do is lock these lines to the other items that are constrained and exit out of it. When I look at it in 3D, of course I'm going to get, always by default it wants to extrude out 1 foot. I'm going to click on this first of all, and I'm going to change the material to be glass. And because when we look at this in plan, all extrusions start from this center line. I want to have this glass centered about the center line, and if it's going to be an exterior window, typically your glass is going to be 1 inch thick. So I want my extrusion to go up 1/2 inch and down 1/2 inch. That's where this extrusion start and extrusion end come in. I can just do an extrusion start of negative 0.5 inches and extrusion end 0.5 inches, a positive. Now we actually got something that looks like a window. And you should be able to change your width and height again to test it out, and your glass should move around with it. So now this is going to be an element that we eventually place into our model, and because it's going to be an element that you might copy over and over again, typically windows, you'd use the same window multiple times in a building, not only for economics, but maybe for design. You might have a whole floor that ends up with 3 foot by 3 foot windows spaced every 8 foot on center, or whatever your design is. But then on another floor you might have another window type that's going to be 5 foot by 3 foot and other different dimensions. So we need the ability to select different window types, and we don't want to have to make and model this over and over again. So this is where, when we click on our family types, we can now add in or create our family types that we're able to select in the Revit environment. Is everyone caught up to this location? Looks like everyone's there. Okay. So if I click on family types and click on new, this is where you would want to name your family type something that actually relates to the dimensional information of your window. This one I'm going to call 4 foot by 4 foot, and I'll hit apply because I've already got my width and height set to 4 foot by 4 foot. If you don't, you might want to change your width and height to match what you said that family type is supposed to be. The next one, I'm going to do a new family type. I might make this one 3 foot by 5 foot. And I'll do my 3 foot as the width, 5 foot as the height, and then hit apply. And I'll just do one more, and let's make this other one 6 foot by 2 foot. And I'll make my width the 6 foot and the height 2 foot, and hit apply. You can start to see why at the beginning of the semester, or the first half of the semester, I spent so much time on parameters and constraints and dimensions and locking all that information together, because every little component that you make in Revit, when it's in the family environment, involves all of those steps that we did. And so you can see this goes pretty smoothly if we have that understanding or that basic knowledge of parameters and setting up constraints and reference planes. I'm going to load this into our project environment now. And now that we've done that, when I place a window, if I go under Home and Window and click on the down arrow, you'll see that I have my window called Window, and then I have my 3 options that we just created, the 3 different types. That's why we had to make all those types set up in that family environment, is so that you can eventually select it from the Type Properties menu. So now I can just I'll click on 3 foot by 5 foot, and then hover over a wall, and you can place windows just like you would doors. And if I look at it in 3D, can see I have my windows, and they're automatically set to, that kind of worked out, 3 foot high. And because I did a 5 foot by 3 foot window, and I happen to set that fin up at 8 feet, I've got kind of this fin at the head. You can see it cuts any reveals and any sweeps that you already had in the wall. So those get cut out. I can also change, by default, the default height of the windowsill was at 3 foot, but you can change the sill height over here to the left. And I could, move these windows up on the wall. I can also select that window and change it to a different type. And so you can see how you can start to quickly place glazing into all your different walls. And these window types do work in sloped walls. So if you have kind of a sloping, crazy wall going on, you can actually put these in there. The only problem is your window is going to remain straight up and down. And so if you actually have an angled wall, so let me make one here real quick, go over how you might try to solve that. Let's make a mass. Yeah, mass 1. Get this wall doing something crazy. All right, so you might have a exterior wall that's slanting and curving and plan and section or whatever. If I were to apply, and watch what happens if I try to apply a wall that has the different reveals and all that kind of stuff in it. I'm going to right click, create similar, and I'm going to place by picking a face. So if I click pick face, and I'm going to pick this, Revit yells at me and says, vertically compound wall type features sweeps, reveals, or splits that aren't supported by non-vertical faces. So basically it creates your wall, but it doesn't create all those reveals and all that detail that you put into it. So that's what I meant by it has to be a straight up and down wall all the time. But I could, let me go into my level 1, and I'll place a home, I'll do window. Let me place a couple different windows in there and look at it in 3D. You can see how it didn't quite cut. It's because I have my mask turned on. Massing. Should be cutting, should have still cut a hole in here. Why didn't you cut a hole? Go back into this family type real quick.
Might there be 2 walls above each other?
Very close.
How to do that? That is why. Good eye. If I go back here and place these windows, there we go.
Yeah.
Nice. So, Let me go back into my family. Undo what I just did there. Move that back. So you can see for the most part, it still cuts the opening, but it's going to keep your frame, up and down. It's not going to actually tilt the window. And there isn't really any kind of setting that we can establish that would tilt that window. I've seen some people actually model where you can model in a angle into the extrusion as a parameter and then set that as a default, and you'd have to sit there and play with all that. But what I would do to make this look right is I'd make it so that this frame doesn't necessarily go to the edge of the wall, and that the frame is always going to be something like, let's say 4 inches thick, and our wall will always be something greater, like 8 inches or 10 inches, make it a thicker wall. And if we go into our family type, our window, and what I'm going to do is make this wall type, for right now I'll make it like 10 inches in this example. And instead of stretching our frame out to lock to the face of the wall, if I were to create just some offsets here, let me undo this, remove the constraints. And because this is offset from the center line, if I make the extrusion end 2 inches, the extrusion start -2 inches, I can get that to work, to some extent. Of course, this wall type I only made 8 inches, so maybe I want to make this a generic. Let's make it a big 12-inch wall. Then you can see how you get the cut, but the window frame fits within the opening, and you can get some kind of nice detailing that you can do without having to build a curtain wall system every single time. And the beauty of that is if, let's say, so I made this one window type, I actually would like an extra mullion in there, and I've placed this window 100 times throughout the model. So if I create this, I'm going to do create similar and create a couple more windows here. If I go back into my window elevation, and again, I'm going to do one thing here. I'm going to change my material of my glass to have a surface pattern solid fill and light gray, just so that when I'm in a hidden line mode, I can actually see my glass. So let's say I go back here and I should change this to be my window. And let's say I want to have a horizontal mullion added in somewhere around here. What I would want to do is select actually create a reference plane, and I'll chop it kind of right here at the top. And maybe I want a mullion that's always going to be equal. So I can click on all these reference planes, and I'm just going to do equal about this center line here. And then I can actually click on this mullion, and let's go ahead and edit the extrusion. And if I offset 1 inch on either side, and then make sure that I snap a dimension from that reference plane to the sketch. And then since it's 1 inches, to make that centered, I'm also going to lock it. So no matter how high how high this window actually gets, this mullion's always going to move equal. And because this is a extrusion sketch, I have to have this set up as a closed element. And so what I have to do is split the element. I'm going to use this split command here at the top. I'm going to split this line and then use my trim and extend. And where did my line go? Now I've got that boolean added in that I should be able to change my types. And because I set up those constraints, you know, that boolean's going to move in all the different configurations automatically. And when I load this into the project, because we've placed that window type all over the place, you know, all of your window types now get added in with that new addition. It's kind of a nice way to quickly, you know, especially if you place this a million times, to start to add in, you know, additional elements if you want to. Guys got that? I think that's all we're going to do today. Kind of 5 minutes early. So for your next assignment, just keep working away at your model. The more you get done now, you know, the less you're going to have to do between May 1st and May 8th. Because remember, our final is May 8th at something like 8:30 at night. We're not going to, I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to just do something like we did for midterm, where you guys upload your material and turn it in. But I'll eventually go over what all the requirements are going to be for the project. But I just want you guys to keep working on your model. The more you get done, the more you can add in windows, railings, all that type of stuff. I'll stay after here for a little bit and answer questions.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to know what all we're gonna have to do, because time's getting tight here.
Yep. So I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. And I'll send out an email that has the written assignment. Essentially, your final product is going to be your finished hotel. And I'm going to look for basically minimum 2 vertical sheets, maybe 30 by 42, because so kind of like we did with the bridge, we had 2, and you got to choose what type of sheets you wanted to, you know, orientation you needed. And we're just going to, I'm going to go over some of the requirements, but it'll be something like an exterior rendering of your hotel, and then a couple floor plans, and I'll show you how you've already got the floor plans being made. And what we're going to do is find a scale. It'd be kind of nice to see I'm trying to figure out the layout that I'd like to see, but some kind of vertical rendering of your hotel. So you see the context of the city, you see your whatever exterior design that you come up with, kind of on a sheet. And then I was thinking that, you know, we could actually get our floor plans scaled down pretty small, turn the line weights white, and you could almost kind of come up with this nice colored rendering that takes up the whole entire sheet. And then you can put your white floor plans of all your different floors so you can see how your hotel's actually changing. We're not going to do construction documents. I want this to be more presentation quality. You're essentially making construction documents. You've got your floor plans that you're making. You'd be able to cut a section. So you might have your exterior view, you're going to have floor plans, and then the next sheet might have a vertical section that also could be, you know, turned white or maybe black or whatever. You know, something that you're already building, and you're basically going to be taking extractions from your model. The last part would be we're going to do a couple interior renderings, and that's going to be one of these upcoming classes is how to, you know, actually accomplish an interior rendering. So you're kind of already got all the parts together. It's just going to be a matter of finishing your model and then making extractions. I'm going to come up with the exact requirements of all that, but that's kind of what I'm thinking at the moment. Originally, I wanted you guys to do a set of construction documents, but I did that last semester with the houses, and you know, I think the presentation quality stuff will show better. Just to,
Yeah, we like that.
yeah, okay. I want, again, like with the bridges, you guys made really cool renderings and nice presentations of your bridges. You know, think about it as these two sheets would be something you'd probably want to put in your portfolio, you know, when you're going after your job interview. So you've got that bridge that's very nice quality. You know, also think about this is your opportunity to make, you know, a building into something that you can present in your portfolio as well. So I'm looking for presentation quality type stuff.
If we're doing like if we're doing like an exterior rendering of like the rest of the Manhattan model, how do you do like lighting and stuff on those buildings?
Well, you know, it's still going to be the sun. So if we're doing like an exterior, you're not thinking like a night shot.
But they're just, yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, well, if we were doing like a daytime shot, all of the solids will come out and, you know, model whatever color we set them, like a block white or, you know, gray or whatever the setting. Night shots are going to be a little bit trickier, but there is a way. Basically, a night shot is going to be something where you'll be using, you know, lighting, interior lights to, you know, we could probably turn those blocks to something transparent, and you could throw in some lights into it or something like that. We'll see about that. Well, actually, you know what? You can make materials luminous. So you can make materials self-illuminate.
Like in Maxwell.
Yeah, and so we could actually apply, you know how we change the materials of our skyscraper or the initial site model? You can make it a luminous, and then you'll have all these blocks kind of lighting up. I'm not sure how it'll turn out.